I know how much people in the church work, how hard they work. I know I'm very involved in my church, and I get to see a lot. I work very closely with a lot of the staff at my church in different ways and friends with them. And I know how much they work. And I know how much that work can take them away from like big, impactful, like personal stuff that really the church is there for, right? And so I think with the technology expanding so much, there's just a great opportunity to leverage it more. Hey everyone, my name's Corey Alderin. I am one of the founders and the CEO of Sermon Shots. Sermon Shots is a platform that repurposes your sermon. It uses your sermon to turn it into all kinds of different content and just helps make it more efficient, time-saving, but allows you to also have the complete flexibility of designing things the way you want. This is my faithly story.
Could you tell me how your faith journey started?
So I grew up in a Christian house, so very fortunate for that. Grew up going to church, saved at a young age, always been part of the church from as early as I can remember. Going into college, moved away, went to college for 4 years, and progressively just kind of got away from church. Not necessarily because I was like against it, just being in college and all the things about being living on your own just kind of took me away from that. And after going to college, met my wife in Chicago. First, I moved out there for my job a few months after college. Probably about 2 weeks after moving there, I met my current wife, and we just within a few weeks that started going to church together there in Chicago, and from then on just kind of progressively got more and more involved in the church and back into things. And since then just been super involved in church in all kinds of different ways. But that's my, I don't know, 2 minute quick journey.
Where'd you go to school?
Iowa State University. So I went there. I chose there because I wanted to be an architect, but very soon realized that it wasn't for me and ended up switching to statistics.
My architect friends call it architorture.
I heard all the torture stories, and I was like, I thought this was a good idea, but I'm not sure if I'm really committed, and so this sounds like too much for me. I heard that sort of work helps really filter out the people that aren't really committed, and it worked for me. Got me out.
So what was it about college that like made you kind of get distracted with your faith?
Yeah. Well, probably all those things, right? It's living on my own, no longer like I get to make all the decisions now. Probably the friend group that I was really in, that just wasn't their thing at all. And so never really had somebody to be like holding me accountable to that. Party scene, sure. I mean that, off college, staying up late and not wanting to wake up early Sunday morning, right? So all those things for sure. I will say one thing. The one thing that just like I feel like has kind of held me connected though. So I was always one to study a lot. So I worked hard in school, and my roommates were very loud most of the time. And the one way that I helped drown everything out was listening to music. And I didn't have any sort of fancy thing. I had one radio station that was able to work, and it was the local Christian radio. And so I listened to that all the time while I was studying. And so that was the one thing that just kind of kept me there. And to this day now, I don't know if it's because of that, but to this day now, every time I work and I need something to like really focus, that's what I do. Headphones on, Christian music, and play it in the background, and helps me really stay focused on what I'm working on.
I'm exactly like that. I only listen to Christian music, but like when I'm working, I'm not really. It's like background music, and so I'm so used to it.
Yep. It's like it just really sets me up to be able to really focus. But yeah, I listened to it, 5 hours a day. I couldn't tell you much about the people, or I couldn't say the names of the songs or anything because it's just in the background, but all the time.
So what was it about Chicago that made you want to go back to church?
Yeah, well, I would say probably a combination of things, but I finally had the one person that was actually like a little bit more accountability than I ever had, right? It wasn't hard. I just like it was just like a conversation of like we should go find a church. I was like, yeah, we should. Wasn't hard. I just never had that in college. And so yeah, just it was pretty simple.
How long into your dating were you like looking for churches together?
Testing my memory here. It's been a good 15 years now. Probably not too long. I would say maybe like 3 months into it. It was a long distance relationship for a while. So then once she moved into Chicago is when it happened. I would say it was like 3 months in or something like that.
The reason why I ask is because I've never really heard couples in a dating relationship, at least very early on, be like, hey, we should go to the same church together while we're dating, you know? And I think that's a really good idea because here's the thing, if you go to the
Yeah.
same church and then you don't work out, like, do you find different churches? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, to be fair, I probably wasn't thinking that long term. Like, so at the young age, a lot of short term thinking, really. So it's a good point, but it probably wasn't on my mind. Probably what did work out though is I had just moved there, and 3 months, 4 months later, she just moved to Chicago. Neither one of us were at a church, and that was she probably wanted to look for one more, and it just kind of happened in the discussion with me. And so, yeah. And we ended up going to a very big church. So if it didn't work out, we could have been completely, we could have still gone.
So, what were some of the criteria for you guys looking for churches?
Yeah. So recalling this, trying to recall from memory, I think we definitely we were attracted to the big, mega church just because of, in your words, glitz and glamour. I mean, I believe we had heard about the church before from people, and so it was just like, go try it out. And so that was, I don't remember that being a difficult thing. It was just like, this is one of the big churches in the area. Let's go try it out. And I believe the first week we went, they had some announcement about the 20 somethings group getting together that day, right after church. If you're in that, you should go. And so we did. We went to that. Not my thing at all. I am an introvert. Not my thing. So if I wasn't there with my now wife, I would not have gone. But that's her thing. She's an extrovert. And so we went, and right away, I don't know what it was. The person leading it, shout out to, she's we were in small group and everything together. Her name's Devin Klein, and she works at Glue now. She was a huge part of connecting us. We just connected with her right there. She got us involved, and I don't know what she said or what she did, but we ended up being in small group with her from that and just connected really well, and so stayed at that church for a long time.
So, what was it about your wife that like drew you to her?
Yeah. Man, you're really testing my memory on all these things. Like, so where we met, so my roommate at the time just moved to Chicago. My roommate, who I knew from college, he had been in Chicago for a while looking for a roommate. He was dating someone, and this was my now wife's good friend. So she came up to visit her, and I think we joke now because I say that my first impression of her was that she was stuck up. That's just me at a young age, not reading people well. And we spent like the whole weekend together because she was up there, and just remember thinking that like this was somebody that I was very interested in over time. Not from my first impression of her, of course. She was nice and easy to talk to, and we just stayed connected after that weekend. Had a few phone calls, and yeah, went from there.
So, what was it about the first impression that made you feel that way? And the reason why I ask is because for anyone who's afraid that they messed up on the first impression, not like your story's like, it's okay, it'll work out.
Yeah, well, if it was the first impression and I left and I walked away, it probably would have never worked out. But yeah, I mean, in relationships, everywhere I've had this experience with like just first impressions can be tricky because I think different people. I always feel like I give off horrible first impressions because I am an introvert. I'm not huge at like being the first one to talk, and sometimes I give off a not a great first impression. But I think that in my experience, most of the time you can learn who the real person is, like just by talking to them a few more times. having more conversation with them. There's a lot of different personality types, and I think some don't quite match in the first impression, at least in my experience. So that was it. When my wife and I got married, or before we got married, part of one of the things that we had to do, the pastor had us take these, personality tests, and it confirmed a lot of what we knew then and to this day. We're personalities are very different. We were told by the pastor that ours is the most different from any one that he's ever married, um, and so that probably contributes a bit to not great first impression.
Even in just this 10-minute conversation, I see God's humor in your life. In college, the only way to save you is to listen to like Christian music. The only way to get you to church is to get you to date a girl that you didn't initially like. And so now you're like,
Yeah, that's great. I hadn't thought about it that way, but that's a good point.
so how did you go from your first job to sermon shots? Because I'm pretty sure there was like many years in between.
Yeah, well, my first job out of college was working in the marketing team of a pharmaceutical company. I did things, I had a statistics degree, so I did a lot of quantitative stuff like forecasting and quantitative analysis of, surveys and things like that. I'd say probably I worked there for about 7 years. I would say probably somewhere in the like 3 to 5 years being there. I actually love my job. But I always felt like I wanted to do something on my own. Like really, the the cap when you work at a huge company. I mean, theoretically I could continue to go up. But I mean, there's a certain cap, right? And I just always wanted to have like control of being able to like kind of manage my growth more, lead a business, do something interesting like that. And so for for a few years while I was working there, I did some things on the side at night, like before I had kids. I could do different things. I was testing out stuff and lots of failures, lots of things that did not work out. But I started through one of the businesses. One of my businesses that I started that failed was creating Christian t-shirts. And what I did in that to try to market that was I built a Facebook page thinking that that would help, right? And I built that with somebody else. It's called Christian Quotes, and it took off. It was a daily quote in an image. Back when Facebook pages, if you built a page that had a lot of following, it actually was impactful. Everybody saw your posts. That grew to about 5 million people very, very early in the Facebook page world. And that was able to help me kind of get to, that was the first thing that was kind of successful. I was able to build a website around it and advertising and all that stuff. And that helped me meet my current business partner. Together, he had a business in the Christian niche as well, and we kind of combined and said, let's combine our two things. He had a website, whatchristianswantoknow.com. I had this Christian Quotes Facebook page, and together we were like, let's build something new. And so we were building websites together and thought that one was successful. We'll keep building these and keep going. But eventually we realized each new one didn't have the same. It was becoming easier and easier for the masses to produce this content. And so it was harder and harder to make money off of it. Advertising revenue was going down as, everybody was going into Facebook and advertising there. And so basically my partner and I were thinking about what we wanted to do next, and software seemed like the thing that was the bigger potential in business. And through some failed things there as well, one of my biggest learnings was it's really hard to find a developer to code your stuff the way you want to. You might get a few good months out of them, and then they're gone. And through that happening multiple times, I was like, I'm interested in this. I'm going to teach myself how to code. So I taught myself how to code to then build the next project that we had. That project was BookBrush. It's bookbrush.com. It's a design platform for authors. Has been very successful and has really been what led me into sermon shots. It helped fund sermon shots. It taught me a lot to be able to then launch. But at one point, again, my partner and I had a discussion of BookBrush is doing well enough. We don't need two owners in it 100% of the time. And so through that, we realized we wanted to help the church. We felt like we were being called to help the church in some way, take what we've learned, take the success, take all that, and help the church in some way. And so from that, I kind of went back to my market research days at the pharmaceutical company and started calling churches, talking to churches, figuring out what they needed. And through a process of that, we heard so many times that sermon clips were a thing that were like challenging for churches to make or expensive, but they wanted to do it. And so I guess we were fortunate that then BookBrush actually had a lot of the underlying code that was needed to start that. And so yeah, so we were able. I just kind of repurposed that a little bit to work for Sermon Shots, and so that's how it all started.
Uh, I have a lot of questions. One,
Sorry, that was the long. That was
no, it's great. It means we have a lot of things to talk about.
the.
What was it like managing 5 million members in a Facebook page? Because, and the reason why I ask is because we have a groups feature, and one of my fears is if we ever got to 5 million, one, where our platform is, and you understanding code now, like it would be a disaster to maintain. So like, not I'm not even talking about technically like on the front end, like how do you manage those many people? And then two, when it was like you realized it needed to die out, did you just abandon it or like did you do something with it? What happened to that group?
So it wasn't really a group; it was a page, and so it's probably it wasn't complicated because I didn't overcomplicate it. I like we didn't really manage it in any way other than just posting a quote or two every day was basically it. And so, looking back, I probably could have done a whole lot more. But early on, it was just post a quote every day. This is what people are coming in for. It's what they're sharing it and all that. It wasn't a group of like asking questions or interaction or things like that. It was, if people commented, it was amen or love that quote this right. It wasn't more complicated than that really. Eventually we turned that into a with this quote here's a devotional, and so we created a whole website on it as well, christianquotes.info. It's still there, it operates, and we would just create a devotional, and that is where more interaction would happen there. And so we had a pastor on staff who would take email questions and things like that, or still do to this day. He takes questions and all that, but it wouldn't be, it definitely is not as complicated or as much community as Faithfully is. So much simpler than what you probably have.
Wait, so is the Facebook page still active, live?
Yeah. So
Oh
yeah, to
wow.
answer that, it's still there. Yeah. In the early days, 5 million people. If we posted something, it could crash our website. You know, over 1 million people would see each quote we posted. To this day, I mean, it's like 100,000, 50,000. It's just so small now that it's not as. It's just not what Facebook's driving people to anymore. And so yeah, but it's still there. We still pastor on staff takes questions there. There's a new quote every day still. It still operates. It is not a big part of our business, so we don't do a huge part of managing it, but it still goes.
No, I think that's amazing because you took a simple thing that was working at the time and it like scaled, right? And I think the scale
Yeah.
was like proof of concept and you kept it simple and it was this thing that you didn't overcomplicate it. And then you just pivoted to something else. Well, this thing just it just is, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
my next question is for me, I went to coding boot camp, right? And it's like a double-edged sword, right? Because one, the curriculum actually, like when you look back, I'm like, oh, I could have just saved money, but the camaraderie with other people, my friends, was actually a good thing because like coding's rough. So for you, like how did you even get into it?
Yeah, well, I will say to this day and looking back, I may not have done it the right way if it was if it was going to be my long-term career thing, because I am not an expert coder at all. At I still get we still have issues with some of our websites because of some early code that I had that has to be fixed, right? So I'm not saying that my path was the right path, but it worked out for me. I never became the expert, but I did. The coding part was just kind of part of my whole trajectory as a business owner. I've always just kind of figured out how to do a thing that needed to be done. And so I learned as I went. Oh, I need this new thing. I'm gonna just teach myself how to do this thing. And so even within coding, each little thing, I don't know why, but I decided just pure vanilla JavaScript was the thing that I was going to teach myself how to do. It seemed the most simple at the time. I don't remember why I chose that, but I did it, and I was able to make BookBrush work from that. And then there were times where like there was this other thing that needed to be done, and I would just learn, okay, how does that need to be done in the coding? And I would add that in, and I never really became the nobody would have ever wanted to hire me to do a great coding project, but I made it work was basically uh, how how it happened. I started it with a book, a thick book, read the whole thing. I to this day I don't understand how I read through that whole JavaScript book, but I did. I was super interested in it, like I get sometimes in business, and then just wanted to try it out, so I started doing it, and then I would go to Google, right? I forget the website that I used, but it,
Stack
asking
Overflow.
right, Stack Overflow. I asked question. I would Google Stack Overflow, right, like all the time when I had something. I mean, that was one of the good things about choosing plain pure vanilla JavaScript is like there it was almost an answer to every one of my questions. So I did a lot of copy and pasting, and did it work? Nope. I'm gonna go try a different one. Did it work? I did a lot of that early on. Yeah, I don't remember exactly where I was going with all of that, but that was my journey of learning to code. I did not ever probably learn the like more theoretical stuff, or here's how you should structure things. It was a lot of just like I learned and I added, and so I taught myself how to do it well enough to build a site, but not probably good enough to apply it across.
Yeah, like looking back, I've only been coding for like maybe 4 years now, right? And the first
Okay.
two was really rough because like literally I was just every day trying to understand what even I'm copying and pasting, right? And like you might think you're an average coder, but you are an amazing startup founder because that's the attitude and the mentality and the hustle you need of like, I'll just learn it. Like I'm not scared, right? Like what's the big
Well,
deal? It might take time, but like we'll get there. And I love that like exuberance in you. Where does that come from?
I don't know. I don't know where that comes from. I get super interested in a thing, and I just like learning. And so I think both of those things combined, just like when there's a need in the business and I'm interested in it, it's easy for me to like just consume information. But I don't know. I guess it's just something that's been there.
How did you start Sermon Shot? And now I understand what you mean by use the old code because it was like kind of similar thing. So that's smart.
Yep. 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 Yeah. Well, it just so happened to be like I wasn't looking to do that. It's just like when
That's the story of
right.
your life, Corey. It just kind of God just does things for you.
I mean, we when we figured out when we realized like sermon clips was the thing that people wanted, it was like we have the video tool already made. Like it, I just need to repurpose it slightly to. I think we could do this really quickly. And so another thing that just kind of dropped on our lap was early on we were testing other things that weren't working out. And what happened in one of those conversations, I had a conversation with, I don't know why he got on a call with us. We were trying to get some feedback on things, and Kenny Jane, you may know him. He got on a call with us. I had no idea who he was at the time, and the conversation was not about sermon shots or anything, but it went there at one point, and he had some great feedback for us. We implemented something, and he just really liked it. And he said they were getting together, him and some other Christian business leaders in the church space were getting together. He said, you should present this idea. Can you build something? We're getting together in 3 months. I was like, I think so. I think we could have an MVP in 3 months. That was kind of quick, but again, going back to like, I'd be able to repurpose that. And so we had a very early MVP that just fortunate to be able to present in front of a good group of business leaders that not only knew like what was needed in this space, but could give some really great feedback too. And so we presented, and it presented well enough, got some great feedback, and was able from there to then develop the idea a little bit more. And within a couple months of developing it a little bit more, we we launched the beta version of it, and we were able to get a good about 100 people to use the beta version of it early on, and gave us some great feedback. And like after after hearing from those 100 people like how much time it saved them and what they were able to do, we realized right then that like this is what we wanted to do, and it definitely was needed. And so from then on, we've just been building it.
So, what is your dream scenario for Sermon Shot?
That we can continue to just help the church. Really, that's what started it all from the start. It's just it's great that not only can I build a business, but I'm helping the church as well. Save time, produce more content that's spreading. And so my dream with it is that we can helping the church in this amount of space. Like I want to help them in this amount of space. Like continue to expand what we can do to help the church. I think there's so many opportunities still for me to have 10 years worth of continued improvements on sermon shots to help the church.
So, what is it about church that really resonates with you and you wanting to help the church?
So I guess I know how much people in the church work, how hard they work. Oh, I know I'm very involved in my church, and I get to see a lot. I work very closely with a lot of the staff at my church in different ways, and friends with them, and I know how much they work, and I know how much that work can take them away from like big, impactful, like personal stuff that really the church is there for, right? And so I think with the technology expanding so much, there's just a great opportunity to leverage it more. And I just think that the people that I know in the church do such great work of connecting with people and just being the support system for people in the church. That's really what their big goal is, right? They're making disciples within the church, and I know that some of this tedious work can take them away from that.
So, what made you fall in love with your church?
I'm gonna probably feel repetitive here again. By chance, we moved here to Indianapolis 8 years ago or so, and came because friends said this was one to come try. And just like the story of going back to how I connected with the 20 somethings, that day when we were there, the very first day we showed up, hey, we're having a pastors get to know all the new people in the church tonight. And it was like, okay, I guess we'll go. And so just meeting the pastor and being at first of all, just being at the church and really feeling like they were speaking our language, but then connecting with the pastors and hearing from them about their passion. Those two things, just the same way as connecting with Devin at the church for the 20 somethings, just like connected us. That same thing connected us right away, and we've been with that same church now since we moved here.
Do you have an example of a specific time where like it made a real big impact and resonated with you?
Yeah, I do remember the church being very welcoming. Basically, the whole way through, everything was just like felt like they wanted us to be there. All the way to the end of being invited to the event, meet the pastor thing, and they actually wanted us to be there and meet us. I think it just has always felt welcoming to new people. I think that was a big reason for connecting early on. I also got a little bit dragged into not dragged, slightly pushed into things that have helped me grow as well. So I remember just a kind of a funny moment. Somebody in our neighborhood where we lived had said, going to our church, had said like, if you guys, speaking to me and my wife, if you guys lead a small group, I'll join. But I'm not going to be in a small group because they didn't feel like they could join another small group. And so the next Sunday, I asked one of the pastors, hey, if I was interested, if I wanted to lead a small group, this was a huge thing for me. Again, introvert, not like that at all. But I was like, okay, all right. I feel like, okay, if somebody's telling me this, I better at least kind of. And I asked him, and the pastor was walking by just as I asked him, and he's like, Adam, Corey wants to lead a small group. What should he do? Yeah, I was like, no, I was just wondering what does it mean to be a small group leader, and he just kind of like he pushed me into it. So I didn't have I didn't feel like I had an option. So that's just one story, but like that has helped me stay connected or very much be connected in my church.
No, that's an amazing story. So are you still a small group leader now?
I have always been a small group leader until this current our small group broke up. Not for bad, but just broke up, and so now we'll be leading a small group here probably coming up. But yes, basically since then until the last like 6 months, I've been a small group leader, and I've um, I've coached now small group leaders. I am part of the leadership team with the pastor at the church, and so I've done all kinds of things at the church now.
You know what's fascinating? Because when I hear your story, the image I get is you are highly favored, my friend, because God keeps putting you in situations where you unexpectedly is forced into something, and you have such like a pure heart. You're like, okay. And then you figure it out. Because if it was me, I'd be like kicking and screaming and like cursing and like why? And then I would do it, right? But for you, you're like, oh, okay. I'm like, oh man, I need to be more like Corey of just like be very open and curious. So like yeah, so like I guess a question for the small group thing is like not knowing anything and just again your entrepreneurial spirit coming out. What are some things that you learned and grew from and now you appreciate like, oh wow, I'm really glad I did this.
Well, I think I'm not sure if this directly answers the question, but kind of does and goes with what you're saying. One thing I've learned is every time that I have said yes to those things, or like I have been extremely uncomfortable. Like these are not easy like things that but every time I felt like it was a thing I was supposed to say yes to. Like it wasn't just a opportunity. It was something. It was an opportunity that God was giving me. And opportunity, I think, is the right word in a lot of these things too, because that's what it was. It presented as an opportunity that I could say yes or no to, and I'm not. I don't want this to sound like I'm perfect in any way, because that's not what I'm saying here. But I try to say yes every time I feel like it's God giving me the opportunity, and so it had. I know that it's uncomfortable, but I've learned trying to quote a pastor friend of mine who said this has said comfortable with being uncomfortable like that's just kind of like how he said it, and I think that's probably accurate. It's like I just do it. Okay. If I feel like God's asking me to do it, then okay, it'll work out. So yeah, he's helped me along the way, that's for sure, because leading a small group, leading a business, coaching people on small group, like these are not things that come natural to me. Like these aren't easy things, so that's definitely not me.
No, and I think you are the perfect example of being what it looks like to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. So I hope like you give yourself more credit because you have a lot of courage to say yes because it is scary to say yes, but for whatever reason, you just kind of do it. And I'm like so amazed to meet someone like you. Yeah.
I appreciate that.
What has fatherhood been like for you of like the ultimate unknown, and like navigating uncomfortable situations?
Oh man. I mean, we could probably have multiple podcasts on just the answer to this. I have a wide range of kids. So my youngest is 6, and my oldest is about to turn 13. I have 3 kids. I have a 10-year-old in there, an adopted 10-year-old, and so there's lots of things from ages to the gender differences to adopting, the process of adopting. We've had, and this might explain some of my answers to this too, is we've had medical problems with all the kids that have been some miraculous healings in it, and just seeing some of the lowest of the lows in the adoption process and in medical issues to like turning out to be like the best possible outcome as possible. I think that probably has been a contributor to some of this. It's just like it was completely out of my control, but then it totally ended up good. To more answer the question, to uh, there's all kinds of new things that happen in parenting. I never feel like I'm the that I ever have the best answer, but trying, I guess, again, to just do what feels like is what God's calling me to do. I think that, yeah, I mean, He's guided me in everything else. So that's just been, maybe that's what helps me every day.
Great answers. Great answers. Last two questions. What are you hoping for at Faithly?
Yeah. So in Faithfully, I just really think that community is an important thing. There's been so many times me connecting with people that has really helped me throughout all of this. You know, just connecting with what seems like random people at the time ends up being friends or the answer I needed for something new in my career or in the business that I or in the code or anything. A lot of that has come through just people. And I feel like the more that we can kind of help each other, we're all in this together, the same end goal, right? And so I think some great things have come from just meeting and being a part of people helping me, but me hopefully helping other people as well in the process. So that's what I'm really looking for in Faithfully, is just being able to have another place of community and meeting new people.
And how can we be praying for you and your family?
Oh, yeah. What's a good prayer request right now? You know, trying to put all this together, owning a business, running a business, and having 3 kids and a wife, and all the things that comes with all those. I'd say the biggest thing is help me make the right decision. When to focus where. That's a big one.
All right, Corey. Thanks for coming on. This is great.
Thanks. It's great being here. Thanks for having me.
All right, that's it for the podcast, guys. Bye.